Late Antiquity and the Medieval World, circa 500 to 1300 CE. Section 1. After the Ancient World. By 500 CE, the ancient world had not ended everywhere at once. Rome had fallen in the west, but Roman power still lived in the east. The Western Roman imperial government had fragmented, but Roman law, Latin learning, cities, churches, landowners, bishops, and local institutions continued across Europe. In Constantinople, the Eastern emperors still called themselves Roman. In Persia, the Sasanian Empire remained one of the great powers of the world. In India, learning, mathematics, religion, and regional kingdoms continued to develop. In China, dynasties rose and fell, but imperial government endured. In Africa, Aksum, Nubia, and later West African states connected trade, religion, and power. In the Americas, Maya cities, Teotihuacan, Zapotec centers, Moche societies, Nazca communities, Cahokia, Chaco, and other indigenous civilizations flourished independently. This age is often called the Middle Ages, but that name mainly comes from European history. For the world as a whole, this was not simply a middle period between Rome and the modern world. It was a post-classical age, an age of new religions, new empires, new trade networks, new technologies, new centers of learning, new kingdoms, new cities, new forms of power. The world between 500 and 1300 CE was not dark, it was changing. The ancient world had transformed, and from that transformation came Byzantium, Islam, Tang and Song China, the Abbasid Caliphate, medieval Europe, powerful African states, South Asian sultanates, Mongol Eurasia, and the first foundations of the Ottoman world. This was the age when old empires gave way to new worlds. Section 2. Justinian and the Eastern Roman Revival. In 527 CE, Justinian became emperor in Constantinople. He did not think of himself as Byzantine. That word was created much later by historians. Justinian ruled as Roman emperor. His empire was the Eastern Roman Empire, and its people still understood themselves as Romans. From Constantinople, Justinian dreamed of restoration. The western provinces had fallen under new kingdoms, but Justinian believed Roman authority could be recovered. His generals, especially Belisarius and Narses, launched campaigns across the Mediterranean. They defeated the Vandals in North Africa. They fought the Ostrogoths in Italy. They reclaimed part of southern Spain. For a moment, the Roman Empire seemed to stretch back toward its ancient shape. But restoration came at a cost. The wars were expensive. Italy was devastated. Taxes increased. Armies consumed resources. The empire gained territory, but holding it was difficult. Justinian also reshaped law. He ordered jurists led by Tribonian to collect, edit, organize, and harmonize centuries of Roman legal tradition. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. It included imperial laws, excerpts from Roman legal scholarship, a legal textbook, and Justinian's later laws. This was not simply a copy of older law. It was a reorganization of Roman legal memory. Centuries later, the rediscovery and study of this legal collection would deeply influence European civil law traditions. Justinian also rebuilt Constantinople after the Nika revolt of 532. The revolt had nearly overthrown him. According to later accounts, Empress Theodora urged him not to flee, insisting that imperial power was worth defending even at the risk of death. The revolt was crushed. Then Justinian ordered the construction of one of the greatest buildings in world history, Hagia Sophia. Built between 532 and 537, designed principally by Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, Hagia Sophia rose with a massive dome that seemed to float above the sacred interior. It was architecture as theology, a vision of heaven in stone, brick, light, and geometry. But Justinian's reign was also struck by disaster. In 541, the first major outbreak of the Justinianic plague spread through the empire. War, plague, taxation, and depopulation weakened what conquest had gained. Justinian's reign was magnificent and brutal, a revival and a warning. The Roman Empire in the east had not died, but the world around it was becoming harder to hold. Section 3. Muhammad and the birth of Islam. Around 570 C.E., Muhammad was born in Mecca. Mecca was a commercial and religious center in western Arabia, connected to tribal networks, trade routes, pilgrimage, and sacred traditions. According to Islamic tradition, around 610, Muhammad began receiving revelations through the angel Gabriel. These revelations were recited in Arabic and became the foundation of the Quran. His message was clear and powerful. There is one God. Human beings are morally accountable. The poor and vulnerable must not be ignored. Charity matters. Prayer matters. Judgment is real. Resurrection is real. Human life is not random. Muhammad's preaching stood in continuity with earlier prophets, including Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, while presenting a final revelation to his community. But his message also challenged the social and religious order of Mecca. Opposition grew. In 622, Muhammad and his followers migrated from Mecca to Medina. This migration was the Hijra. It became the starting point of the Islamic calendar. In Medina, Muhammad became not only a prophet and teacher, but also the leader of a new religious and political community. The Muslim community was not only a group of believers, it became a social order, a community with obligations, alliances, law, worship, conflict, and leadership. Muhammad returned to Mecca in 630. By his death in 632, much of Arabia had entered the new Muslim community. But Islam did not appear fully developed in one moment. Quranic interpretation, Hadith scholarship, Islamic law, theology, philosophy, and institutions developed over later centuries. The birth of Islam reshaped world history. It created a new religious civilization, a new political community, a new sacred text, a new Arabic literary and theological tradition. And within a century, Muslim-ruled states would stretch from Iberia to Central Asia. Section 4. Tang China and the Cosmopolitan East. In 618, the Tang dynasty came to power in China. After the short-lived Sui dynasty had reunited China and built large projects at enormous cost, the Tang inherited both danger and opportunity. Tang China became one of the most powerful and cosmopolitan states of the age. Its capital, Chang'an, was one of the great cities of the world. Merchants, monks, diplomats, artisans, soldiers, and envoys moved through its streets. Central Asians, Persians, Sogdians, Koreans, Japanese, Indians, Arabs, Turks, Chinese officials, Buddhist monks, Taoist priests, Confucian scholars. Chang'an was a city of empire and exchange. Tang government combined imperial bureaucracy, law codes, taxation, land registration, provincial administration, military frontier commands, Confucian education, and civil service examinations. Examinations were becoming more important, though aristocratic family background and patronage still mattered greatly. The fully mature examination bureaucracy would develop more strongly under the Song. Tang culture was rich. Buddhism flourished. Taoism received imperial support. Confucian learning remained important. The monk Xuanzang travelled to India and returned with Buddhist texts, becoming one of the great figures of cross-cultural religious scholarship. Poetry reached extraordinary heights. Li Bai wrote with imagination, wine, moonlight, friendship, exile, and cosmic freedom. Du Fu wrote with moral seriousness, grief, war, poverty, duty, and human suffering. Together they became defining voices of Chinese literature. But Tang history was not one long golden age. In 755, the Andalusian rebellion shattered the empire. Millions were killed, displaced, or affected. Central authority weakened. Provincial military governors grew stronger. The Tang survived for more than a century afterward, but it never fully recovered its earlier strength. Tang China shows both the brilliance and fragility of empire. A world of poetry, trade, Buddhism, bureaucracy, and cosmopolitan grandeur. And a world where rebellion could break the centre of power. Section 5. The Early Caliphates and the Expansion of Islam. After Muhammad's death in 632, leadership passed to the caliphs. The first four caliphs are remembered as the Rashidun caliphs: Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. Under their rule and the early Muslim state, Arab Muslim armies moved beyond Arabia with extraordinary speed. They defeated the Sasanian Persian Empire. They took Syria, Egypt, and other territories from the Eastern Roman Empire. They entered North Africa. They transformed the political map of Western Asia. After internal conflict, the Umayyad dynasty came to power in 661. Ruling from Damascus, the Umayyads extended Muslim political authority even farther, across North Africa, into most of Iberia, across Iran, into Central Asia, toward the northwestern Indian subcontinent. At its greatest extent, the Umayyad realm was among the largest states the world had yet seen. But conquest did not mean instant conversion. In many conquered regions, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, Buddhists, Hindus, and others remained numerous for generations or centuries. Islamization was gradual. Arabization was gradual. People converted for many reasons: faith, taxation, social mobility, marriage, trade, patronage, urban life, political identity. Arabic became a language of administration, religion, literature, and scholarship, but local languages and cultures continued. The early caliphates created a new world, not only by conquest, but by linking regions together: the Mediterranean, Arabia, Persia, Central Asia, North Africa, Iberia. The old boundaries of Rome and Persia were broken. A new religious and political civilization had emerged. Section 6. Brahmagupta and the Power of Zero. In 628, in India, the mathematician Brahmagupta completed the Brahma Sfuta Siddhanta. His work became one of the most important stages in the history of mathematics. The decimal place value system had developed over centuries in India. Brahmagupta did not invent zero from nothing, but he gave systematic rules for calculating with zero, positive numbers, and negative numbers. He defined zero as the result of subtracting a number from itself. He gave rules for adding and subtracting zero. He worked with positive quantities as fortunes and negative quantities as debts. He studied quadratic equations, indeterminate equations, astronomical calculation. His attempts to define division by zero were incorrect, showing how difficult the concept remained. But treating zero as a number was revolutionary. Zero was not merely an empty space. It became something that could enter calculation. The Indian numeral system and place value methods later travelled through Arabic language scholarship. Works associated with al-Khwarizmi helped transmit these methods into Europe. Europeans later called the symbols Arabic numerals, though their deeper origin was Indian. This is how knowledge travels. Born in one region, translated in another, renamed in a third, used by the world. Zero changed mathematics. It made calculation more powerful. It helped make algebra, astronomy, accounting, engineering, navigation, and later science far more efficient. A symbol for nothing became one of humanity's greatest intellectual tools. Section 7. Tours, the Franks and Carolingian power. In 732, near Tours or Poitiers, a Frankish army led by Charles Martel defeated an Andalusi Muslim expedition commanded by Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi. The battle became famous in later European memory. It was remembered as a defense of Christian Europe against Islamic expansion. But the real history is more careful. The battle ended that particular expedition. It strengthened Charles Martel's prestige. It helped elevate the Carolingian family. But it did not single-handedly save Europe from conquest. The Andalusi force may have been conducting a major raid rather than a permanent campaign to conquer all northern Europe. Muslim military activity north of the Pyrenees continued after 732, and Umayyad expansion was limited by many factors: distance, logistics, politics, military resistance, internal conflict, and geography. Still, the battle mattered. Charles Martel's victory helped lay the foundation for Carolingian power. His descendants would reshape Western Europe. His grandson Charlemagne would become king, conqueror, reformer, and emperor. Tours was not the single hinge of world history, but it was an important step in the rise of a Frankish dynasty that would define medieval Europe. Section 8. Abbasid Baghdad and the House of Translation. In 750, the Abbasids overthrew the Umayyads. In 762, they founded a new capital, Baghdad. Built near major river and overland routes, Baghdad became one of the greatest cities of the medieval world. A city of government, trade, poetry, theology, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, law, debate. The Abbasid Caliphate did not maintain direct control over one unified empire for its entire history. Political power fragmented from the 9th century onward as regional dynasties became increasingly independent. But Baghdad remained a symbol of caliphal authority and intellectual life. Under Abbasid patronage, a vast translation movement developed. Scholars translated works from Greek, Syriac, Middle Persian, Sanskrit and other languages into Arabic. They translated Aristotle, Galen, Ptolemy, Euclid, Indian astronomical and mathematical works, Persian political and scientific traditions. But this was not mere preservation. Scholars criticized, corrected, expanded, commented, disagreed, improved. Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Persian, Arab, Central Asian, and other scholars participated in this intellectual culture. Arabic became a language of international scholarship. The institution often called the Bait al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, was likely a caliphal library and scholarly centre, though popular descriptions may exaggerate how much it resembled a modern university. Still, the achievement was real. Baghdad became one of the great centres of world knowledge, a place where older traditions were gathered and transformed. The ancient world sciences did not disappear. They were translated, debated, and carried forward into new forms. Section 9. Al-Khwarizmi and the language of algebra. Around the early 9th century, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi worked in Abbasid Baghdad. His name would echo across history in two words: algebra, algorithm. His book on algebra presented systematic methods for solving linear and quadratic equations. It was not abstract mathematics alone, it was practical, inheritance, trade, surveying, legal calculation, land division, debt, commerce. Algebra referred to a mathematical operation of restoration or completion. From that word came algebra. Al-Khwarizmi did not invent every method for solving equations. Babylonian, Greek, Indian, and Chinese mathematicians had solved mathematical problems long before him. But he organized algebra as a systematic discipline. He showed how equations could be classified and solved through general methods. He also wrote an influential account of Indian place-value numerals and calculation procedures. Latin translations of works associated with his name helped transmit decimal arithmetic to Europe. His name, Latinized as al-Khwarizmi, eventually gave rise to the word algorithm. At first, algorithm meant calculation with numerals. Later, it came to mean any step-by-step procedure for solving a problem. Today, algorithms run computers, search engines, trading systems, artificial intelligence, and modern digital civilization. But the word traces back to a scholar in Abbasid Baghdad. Al-Khwarizmi's work shows how ideas travel across civilizations: Indian numerals, Arabic scholarship, Latin translation, European adoption, modern computation, a chain of knowledge crossing more than 1,000 years. Section 10. Charlemagne and the Carolingian Empire. In 768, Charlemagne became king of the Franks. Through war, alliance, conquest, and administration, he built one of the largest Western European empires since Rome. He conquered the Lombards in Italy, fought the Saxons for decades, expanded influence across much of Western and Central Europe. His campaigns were often brutal. The wars against the Saxons included forced conversion, deportation, execution, and destruction of sacred sites. Charlemagne's empire was not a peaceful union of Europe. It was built by force. But it also created new institutions of rule. On Christmas Day in the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne emperor in Rome. The title connected him to the memory of the Roman Empire. It also deepened the relationship between Frankish kingship and the Latin Church. Charlemagne and his advisors promoted what is now called the Carolingian Renaissance. They supported palace and monastic schools, corrected and copied manuscripts, trained clergy, standardized Latin, improved record-keeping, developed Carolingian minuscule, a clear handwriting style that made texts easier to read and copy. This mattered enormously. Many classical and Christian texts survived because Carolingian scribes copied them. The empire eventually fragmented among Charlemagne's descendants, especially after the Treaty of Verdun in 843. But the Carolingian project left a lasting mark. It reshaped Western European kingship, strengthened church reform, preserved texts, revived imperial imagination. Charlemagne stood between Rome and medieval Europe, a conqueror, a patron of learning, a Christian emperor, a ruler whose legacy was both intellectual and violent. Section 11. Scholars of the Islamic world. From the 8th century onward, scholarship flourished across many centers of the Islamic world: Baghdad, Basra, Kufa, Cairo, Damascus, Bukhara, Cordoba, later Moraga. This intellectual culture is often called the Islamic Golden Age but the phrase can mislead if it sounds like one single place or one fixed period. It was broad, long-lasting, multilingual, multi-religious, Persian, Arab, Turkic, Jewish, Christian, and other scholars contributed, often writing in Arabic because Arabic had become a major language of scholarship. Al-Kindi helped create Arabic philosophical vocabulary and worked in philosophy, mathematics, music, optics, medicine, and pharmacology. Hunayn ibn Ishaq translated and explained medical works and contributed to ophthalmology. Thabit ibn Qurra worked in mathematics, astronomy, and mechanics. Al-Razi advanced clinical medicine, pharmacology, and patient observation. Al-Farabi developed logic, political philosophy, music theory, and metaphysics. Al-Battani refined mathematical astronomy. These scholars did not simply inherit Greek knowledge, they questioned it, corrected it, extended it. They worked with Greek, Persian, Indian, and local traditions. They created new syntheses. This was one of the great scholarly cultures of world history, a world where translation became transformation, where medicine, philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, optics, and pharmacology developed in dialogue with many civilizations. Section 12. Al-Razi and the Clinical Eye. Around 865 to 925, the Persian physician Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi lived and worked. In Latin, he became known as Rhazes. He directed hospitals in Ray and Baghdad. His medical work emphasized direct clinical observation, not just theory, not just inherited authority, but watching patients carefully, comparing symptoms, recording cases, testing treatments, studying diet, environment, and medicine. Al-Razi wrote an influential account distinguishing smallpox from measles. These diseases had often been confused, but careful clinical observation revealed differences. He also compiled large medical works drawing from Greek, Indian, Persian, and his own observations. Al-Razi investigated minerals, substances, laboratory tools, and pharmaceutical preparations. It would be anachronistic to call this modern chemistry. But his work contributed to the long historical path toward experimental material practices, pharmacy, and chemistry. Al-Razi represents a key shift in medical thought. The physician must observe, compare, test, treat, learn from the patient. His influence extended into Islamic medicine and later European medicine for centuries. Section 13. Printing in China. Printing transformed the movement of knowledge. In China, woodblock printing was already established before the 10th century. The method was direct and powerful. A page was carved in reverse onto a wooden block. The block was inked. Paper was pressed onto it. A text could be reproduced again and again. Printing was especially useful for Buddhist scriptures, religious images, calendars, dictionaries, government texts, educational material, and examination preparation. The Diamond Sutra, dated 868, is the earliest surviving complete printed book with a precise date. This means printing was already technically sophisticated during the Tang period. Under the Song dynasty, printing expanded even more. Books became more available, religious texts circulated more widely, educational culture grew, government administration benefited. Around the 1040s, Bisheng developed movable type using individual ceramic characters. Movable type was ingenious, but it did not immediately replace woodblocks. Chinese writing used thousands of characters, and woodblocks were still efficient for producing large editions. Printing did not create universal literacy overnight. People still needed education, access to paper, money, distribution systems, and time to read. But printing changed civilization. It allowed texts to multiply, ideas to travel, religious teachings to spread, examination culture to expand. The written word became more reproducible than ever before. Long before Gutenberg's press in Europe, East Asia had already entered the age of printed books. Section 14. Ibn al-Haytham and the Science of Light. Around 965 to 1040, Ibn al-Haytham, known in Latin as al-Hazan, transformed the study of optics. He produced his most influential work in Egypt. His Book of Optics challenged older theories that vision worked because the eye emitted rays. Instead, Ibn al-Haytham argued that vision happens when light enters the eye. Light travels from luminous sources. It reflects from objects. It enters the eye. The visual system processes the incoming information. This was a major correction. He studied reflection, refraction, shadows, lenses, visual perception, the geometry of light, camera obscura effects. His work combined mathematical reasoning with controlled observation and experiment. He did not simply speculate, he tested. He used apparatus. He criticized earlier authorities. He connected geometry to physical light. It is often said that Ibn al-Haytham invented the scientific method. That is too simple. Experimental reasoning developed across many cultures and centuries. But Ibn al-Haytham's achievement was still extraordinary. He brought together experiment, mathematics, skepticism, and careful observation in a highly rigorous way. His optics influenced later Islamic and Latin European science. He showed that seeing is not passive. Light moves. The eye receives. The mind interprets. In studying vision, he changed how humanity understood both the world and the act of knowing it. Section 15. Ibn Sina and the Architecture of Medicine and Philosophy. Around 980 to 1037, Ibn Sina lived as one of the greatest physicians and philosophers of the medieval world. In Latin, he became known as Avicenna. He wrote mostly in Arabic, though he was Persian-speaking. His canon of medicine organized medical knowledge into a vast and influential system: anatomy, physiology, diagnosis, disease classification, drugs, pharmacology, hygiene, treatment, general principles of medicine. The canon drew from Greek, Islamic, Persian, and Indian traditions, and Ibn Sina's own analysis. It became a major medical textbook in Islamic lands and Latin Europe. For centuries, physicians studied it. But Ibn Sina was not only a physician. His Book of Healing was a philosophical encyclopedia. It covered logic, natural philosophy, mathematics, psychology, and metaphysics. One of his most important philosophical contributions was the distinction between essence and existence. What a thing is, and that it exists. He also developed an argument for a necessary existent, a being whose existence is not dependent on anything else. These ideas deeply influenced Islamic, Jewish, and Christian philosophy. Like all pre-modern physicians, Ibn Sina accepted some theories later rejected by modern science. But his importance lies in the structure, clarity, and reach of his thought. He built systems, medical systems, logical systems, metaphysical systems. He became one of the great architects of medieval knowledge. Section 16. Song China and the Commercial Transformation. From 960 to 1279, the Song dynasty ruled China through one of the most economically and technologically dynamic periods in world history. Song China saw major growth in cities, markets, printing, education, and administration. The civil service examination system became more central to government. A scholar official class gained increasing importance. Printing helped spread texts used in education and examination preparation. Commerce expanded. Large cities grew. Paper money appeared. Iron production increased. Agricultural productivity improved. New rice varieties helped support population growth. Maritime trade flourished. Navigation improved. Gunpowder weapons began developing. The Song did not rule through military dominance in the same way some earlier dynasties had. It faced powerful northern rivals, the Liao, the Jin, later the Mongols. But internally, Song China became a highly sophisticated society of commerce, bureaucracy, technology, and scholarship. It helped define many features later associated with imperial Chinese civilization. A powerful scholar official class, mass printing, urban markets, state finance, Neo-Confucian thought, commercial agriculture. Song China shows that medieval history was not stagnant. In East Asia, this was a period of urban growth, technological expansion, intellectual revival, and administrative sophistication. Section 17. Lordship, castles, and so-called feudalism. In Europe between the 10th and 13th centuries, political power often became local and fragmented. The word feudalism is commonly used, but it can mislead. It was not one uniform system used everywhere in the same way. It is a modern label that combines several different institutions: lords and vassals, fiefs, castles, knights, hereditary aristocracy, peasant obligations, manorial agriculture. Vassalage mostly concerned relationships among elites. A vassal pledged loyalty and service to a lord. In return, he might receive land or income. Manorialism concerned rural estates, agriculture, labour, rents, dues, and peasant obligations. In some places these systems overlapped. In others they differed greatly. Europe was not one thing. England, France, the Holy Roman Empire, Iberia, Italy, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe all developed different political patterns. Castles became centres of military power. Mounted warriors became symbols of elite violence and status. Peasants worked fields under obligations shaped by local custom, lordship, and law. At the same time, kings gradually built stronger courts, taxation systems, written administrations, and legal institutions. Medieval Europe was not only weak kings and powerful lords, it was a contested world where local power and royal power struggled over authority. Feudalism, if the word is used, must be understood as a loose umbrella, not a single machine, not one medieval blueprint, but a range of systems created by land, war, labour, oath, protection, and power. Section 18. The Norman Conquest. In 1066, England faced a succession crisis. King Edward the Confessor died without an undisputed heir. Harold Godwinson became king, but he faced two invasions. In the north, Harold Hardrada of Norway invaded. Harold defeated him at Stamford Bridge. Then he rushed south. William, Duke of Normandy, had landed in England. On October 14, 1066, at the Battle of Hastings, William defeated Harold Godwinson. Harold was killed. William was crowned king on Christmas Day. The Norman Conquest transformed England. Much of the English landholding elite was replaced. Castles spread across the landscape. A French-speaking aristocracy ruled over an English-speaking population. The church was reorganized. England became tied more closely to continental Europe. The English language changed as Norman French entered law, government, war, food, and elite culture. But not everything was erased. Many Anglo-Saxon institutions survived: shires, taxation systems, local administration, royal record-keeping. William adapted what was useful. In 1086, he ordered the Domesday Survey, a vast record of land, resources, obligations, and value. The conquest was violent, but it was also administrative. William did not only take England, he measured it. The Norman Conquest shows how invasion, language, landholding, castles, law, and administration could remake a kingdom. Section 19. The Crusades. In 1095, at the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban II called for an armed expedition to assist Eastern Christians and recover Jerusalem. The First Crusade captured Jerusalem in 1099. The Crusaders established Latin Christian states in the Eastern Mediterranean. For participants, crusading was sacred warfare, an armed pilgrimage, a path of penance, a war framed as service to God. But crusading was also shaped by land, status, violence, ambition, politics, and survival. The Crusades cannot be reduced only to greed, but they also cannot be purified into only faith. They were both religious and brutal. Crusaders massacred Muslim and Jewish communities. They conquered cities, created states, enslaved people, displaced populations, fought Muslims, Jews, Eastern Christians, and sometimes other Latin Christians. In 1187, Saladin defeated the Crusader army at Hattin and recovered Jerusalem. The Third Crusade followed, involving Richard I of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade was diverted to Constantinople and sacked the Christian capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. This was one of the most catastrophic events in medieval Christian history. In 1291, Acre fell, ending the principal mainland Crusader presence in the Levant. But crusading did not end there. Crusades continued in Iberia, the Baltic, Eastern Europe, and campaigns against groups condemned as heretics. The Crusades created war, trauma, cultural contact, trade, translation, hatred, diplomacy, and memory. They show the power and danger of religion fused with military violence. Section 20. The rise of European universities. During the 11th and 12th centuries, new institutions of learning began forming in Europe. Universities. They did not appear fully formed in one moment. They grew from cathedral schools, urban schools, and associations of teachers and students. The Latin word universitas meant a corporation, a legally recognized body. Universities negotiated rights, fees, privileges, and protection with cities, bishops, popes, and kings. Bologna became famous for law, Paris for theology and the arts. Oxford developed as a major centre of study. Salerno was known for medicine. Students studied the liberal arts, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. Then some continued into law, medicine, or theology. Universities created an international scholarly culture using Latin. They standardized degrees, developed formal disputation, trained clergy, lawyers, administrators, and scholars. They were not the world's first centers of higher learning. Buddhist monasteries, Islamic madrasas, Chinese academies, and other institutions had long histories of scholarship. But European universities created a distinctive corporate model that would shape later education. A world of lectures, texts, debates, masters, students, degrees. Arguments. The university became one of medieval Europe's great inventions, a place where reason and authority met in structured conflict. Section 21. Maimonides and the meeting of faith and reason. Moses Maimonides was born in Cordoba around 1135 or 1138. He later lived in North Africa, Palestine, and Egypt. He became one of the greatest Jewish thinkers of the medieval world, a legal scholar, philosopher, physician, community leader. His Mishneh Torah organized Jewish law into a systematic 14-volume compendium. It was a massive work of classification, law made orderly, practice made structured. His Guide for the Perplexed examined the relationship between Jewish revelation and Aristotelian philosophy. How can language describe God? Can divine attributes be understood literally? How does creation relate to reason? What is prophecy? What is the role of the human intellect? Maimonides argued that descriptions of God should not be understood as ordinary physical or human traits. God is not a body. God is not described like a human being. Religious language must be interpreted carefully. Maimonides also practiced medicine in Egypt. His life stood at the meeting point of Jewish law, Islamic intellectual culture, Greek philosophy, and practical medical work. He influenced Jewish thought deeply, but also Christian and Islamic thinkers. Maimonides represents the medieval struggle to reconcile faith and reason, scripture and philosophy, law and intellect, tradition and inquiry. Section 22. Genghis Khan and the Mongol World. In 1206, Temujin united the Mongol tribes and was proclaimed Genghis Khan. He reorganized warriors into units loyal to the imperial leadership rather than only old tribal structures. He built one of the most effective military systems in world history. Mongol armies were fast, mobile, disciplined, skilled in mounted archery, capable of coordinated maneuvers over enormous distances. They conquered or attacked northern China, Central Asia, the Khwarizmian Empire, Iran, the Caucasus, and parts of Eastern Europe. Their campaigns caused enormous destruction. Cities were devastated. Populations were killed, enslaved, displaced, or forced into service. Contemporary writers describe terror on a massive scale. Genghis Khan founded the empire, but it reached its greatest size under his successors: Ögedei, Mönche, Batu, Kublai. By the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire had become the largest contiguous land empire in history. It eventually divided into major khanates. The Mongol conquests were violent, but Mongol rule also intensified movement across Eurasia. Merchants, diplomats, engineers, physicians, artisans, missionaries, technologies, ideas, diseases, goods. The Mongol world connected China, Central Asia, Persia, Russia, the Islamic world, and Europe in new ways. This was exchange through empire, but also exchange through conquest and coercion. The Mongols did not simply destroy, they reorganized Eurasia, and the consequences would shape the next centuries of world history. Section 23. The Delhi Sultanate. In 1206, another major state began in northern India, the Delhi Sultanate. It emerged after the fragmentation of Ghurid authority. Qutb al-Din Aibak, a former military slave and Ghurid commander, established the first Delhi-based dynasty. The Sultanate was not one unchanging government. It consisted of several dynasties: the Mamluk, or slave dynasty, the Khalji dynasty, the Tughlaq dynasty, the Sayyid dynasty, the Lodi dynasty, In this period, the early rulers built a new political order in northern India. Persian became an important language of government and literature. Islamic law, Persianate court culture, Central Asian military traditions, and Indian political realities interacted. Most subjects remained religiously diverse. Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Muslim, and local traditions existed across the region. The Delhi Sultanate brought new architecture, new elite cultures, new military structures, and new political networks. It was not simply foreign rule imposed on a blank landscape, it was a complex interaction between Central Asian, Persianate, Islamic, and South Asian worlds. The Sultanate would last until 1526, but its beginning belongs to this age of post-classical state formation. Section 24, Magna Carta and the Limits of Kingship. In 1215, King John of England faced rebellion. His barons were angry over taxation, military failure, arbitrary rule, and disputes over justice. At Runnymede, they forced him to agree to a document later known as Magna Carta, the Great Charter. It did not create democracy. It did not establish equal rights for everyone. Most of its protections served barons, church interests, and elite institutions. It addressed feudal payments, inheritance, church liberties, debt, local administration, royal officials, and lawful procedure. The agreement failed almost immediately. Pope Innocent III annulled it. Civil war resumed. But Magna Carta was reissued in later versions in 1216, 1217, and 1225. Over time, certain clauses gained new life, especially the idea that no free person should be imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, or destroyed without lawful judgment and due process. Later lawyers and political thinkers transformed Magna Carta into a symbol of limited government. The original document was narrow. Its later meaning became enormous. It became one of the foundations in the long history of legal limits on arbitrary power. A failed peace treaty became a lasting symbol. Section 25. Thomas Aquinas and Scholastic Thought. Around 1225, Thomas Aquinas was born. He became a Dominican friar and one of the most important philosophers and theologians of medieval Europe. He studied and taught in places such as Paris and Italy. Aquinas worked within scholasticism, a method of disciplined questioning, precise definitions, objections, counter-arguments, authorities compared, reasoning structured, conclusions carefully defended. Aquinas attempted to integrate Christian revelation with Aristotelian philosophy. He also drew directly and indirectly on Islamic and Jewish thinkers, including Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, and Maimonides. His works included the Summa contra Gentiles and the unfinished Summa Theologiae. He wrote on faith and reason, natural law, virtue, causation, divine attributes, human action, soul and body, political authority. He did not simply Christianize Aristotle, he accepted some Aristotelian ideas, modified others, rejected others. His thought became one of the great syntheses of medieval intellectual history. Aquinas believed reason could discover truths about the world, morality, and God's existence. But revelation remained necessary for truths beyond reason's full reach. For him, faith and reason were not enemies. They were different paths toward truth. His work shaped Catholic theology, philosophy, law, ethics, and education for centuries. Section 26. Marco Polo and Mongol Eurasia. Between 1271 and 1295, Marco Polo travelled with his father Niccolo and uncle Maffeo through Mongol-ruled Eurasia. They journeyed toward the court of Kublai Khan. Marco later returned to Venice. After being captured during war between Venice and Genoa, he reportedly dictated his account to Rustichello of Pisa, a writer of romances. Because of this, Marco Polo's book mixes travel reporting with literary shaping. It describes Yuan China, Central Asian routes, paper money, postal systems, urban commerce, court life, Indian Ocean trade, regions he may have visited, regions he may have known through second-hand reports. Marco Polo was not the first European to reach Asia. Merchants, missionaries, and diplomats had travelled through Mongol territories before him. But his account became one of the most influential European descriptions of Asia. It expanded imagination. It described wealth, cities, administration, trade, and customs unfamiliar to many European readers. Some medieval readers doubted parts of it. Modern scholars still debate details. But the work preserves substantial knowledge of a Eurasian world connected by Mongol rule. Marco Polo's journey was possible because the Mongol Empire had opened routes across the continent. Again, empire created violence and connection together. The same conquests that destroyed cities also allowed travellers to cross distances that had once been far more difficult. Section 27, Africa, Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, and the Americas. The post-classical world was not only Europe, Islam, China, and the Mongols. Across Africa, states rose through trade, agriculture, religion, and political organization. In West Africa, Ghana became powerful through trans-Saharan trade in gold and other goods. By the 13th century, Mali began emerging as another major West African power. Swahili city-states along the East African coast participated in Indian Ocean commerce, linking Africa with Arabia, Persia, India, and beyond. Great Zimbabwe rose as a major centre of cattle, gold, stone architecture, and trade. In Korea, unified Silla and later Goryeo developed political consolidation, Buddhism, printing, scholarship, and ceramic traditions. In Japan, the Nara, Heian, and Kamakura periods saw imperial institutions, Buddhist traditions, kana writing, court literature, and the rise of warrior government. Murasaki Shikibu's tale of Genji became one of the great works of world literature. In Southeast Asia, Chola power from South India, Srivijaya, maritime trade, Khmer Angkor, and pagan in Burma shaped the region. Angkor became one of the greatest urban and religious landscapes in the world, with monumental Hindu and Buddhist architecture and complex water systems. In the Andes, Wari and Tiwanaku transformed regional administration, road networks, textiles, religion, and monumental centers. In North America, Cahokia and Chaco became major indigenous centers of ceremony, trade, and political organization. In Mesoamerica, classic and post-classic Maya societies developed writing, dynastic kingship, astronomy, calendars, monumental architecture, and regional commercial networks. The medieval world was global. Its centers were many. Its achievements were diverse. Any timeline that tells only one region misses the real shape of history. Section 28. The Ottoman Beginning. Around the end of the 13th century, a small frontier principality emerged in northwestern Anatolia. Its leader was Osman I. The traditional date for the Ottoman state's founding is 1299. But this is conventional, not securely documented as a formal founding event. The Ottoman state formed gradually. Its early growth depended on frontier warfare, alliances, marriage, migration, religious and military patronage, and the incorporation of Byzantine and Turkic elites. It stood on the borderlands of a weakened Byzantine world. Osman's successors, especially Orhan, Murad I, and Bayezid I, would transform the principality into a major state. Bursa would be captured after Osman's lifetime. Many institutions associated with the mature Ottoman Empire developed later, in the 14th and 15th centuries. But the seed was here, a frontier lordship, a small principality, a new power forming at the edge of older empires. By 1300, the Ottoman story was only beginning. But it would eventually become one of the greatest imperial stories in world history. Section 29. Closing. The Postclassical World. Between 500 and 1300 CE, the world did not sleep. It transformed. Justinian tried to restore Roman power. Islam emerged in Arabia and spread across continents. Tang China became a center of poetry, bureaucracy, Buddhism, and exchange. The caliphates connected Iberia, North Africa, Arabia, Persia, Central Asia, and South Asia. Brahmagupta advanced mathematics with zero and negative numbers. Abbasid Baghdad became a center of translation, philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. Al-Khwarizmi helped give the world algebra and algorithm. Charlemagne built an empire and revived Latin learning. Chinese printing changed the spread of texts. Ibn al-Haytham transformed optics. Ibn Sina organized medicine and philosophy. Song China expanded commerce, printing, paper money, and bureaucracy. Medieval Europe developed lordship, castles, universities, crusades, and legal traditions. Maimonides united Jewish law and philosophy. Genghis Khan founded the Mongol Empire. The Delhi Sultanate rose in northern India. Magna Carta became a symbol of lawful limits on kings. Thomas Aquinas built a scholastic synthesis of faith and reason. Marco Polo described Mongol Asia to Europe. African kingdoms, Swahili cities, Korean states, Japanese courts, Southeast Asian empires, Maya cities, Cahokia, Chaco, Wari, Tiwanaku, Great Zimbabwe, and Angkor all shaped the wider human story. And by the end of the 13th century, the Ottoman Principality had appeared on the edge of Byzantium. This was not a dark age. It was an age of movement, faith, war, scholarship, trade, mathematics, medicine, printing, empire, law, cities, and cultural transformation. The ancient world had become the medieval world. The medieval world had become deeply connected, and by 1300 CE, the foundations were being laid for the next great transformations: the Renaissance, the rise of gunpowder empires, the expansion of global trade, the age of exploration, the printing revolution in Europe, the fall of Constantinople, the rise of the Ottoman Empire, and eventually the modern world. History did not move in one straight line. It moved through many centers, many peoples, many languages, many religions, many roads, many seas. The post-classical world was not a pause between ancient and modern. It was one of the great engines of human history.